Hello and welcome to another episode of the G.I. Joe New News Review. I am David Allen. This interview was originally planned for 3D Joes, but due to unforeseen circumstances, the interview will now be presented here instead for your viewing pleasure. I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to 3D Joes. I am David Allen. I am joined by my special guest, Ron Wagner. This is for 3D Joes, which is the history of the G.I. Joe brand. Covers from the inception to the present, all aspects of the G.I. Joe brand: comic books, animation, toys, design, you name it. And we are joined by Ron Wagner, who worked on the original G.I. Joe Ara series in 1986 or 7.
Somewhere in there.
For Marvel Comics. Welcome, Ron. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So on top of working as a comic book artist, Ron has done portrait art. He has done mural art. He has done storyboarding. He has done video game design. And I might be missing some other things.
You hit the high points. So
so trying to get your headspace around each of these formats, because they're all different styles of artwork and you have to approach them all differently. How do you do that? How do you go about trying to get yourself in that space for each different thing?
Well, it takes me a little bit. It takes me a little, to kind of, we're going from one thing to another. So it kind of takes me a little bit to kind of get my head there, because it's an interesting question because they're all really different. So, I have to kind of it takes me a little time to kind of shift from one thing to another. Even though there's still the common denominator of they're all drawings, everything has to be drawn, right? And there's design and elements that are the same, but comic books are vastly different than storyboards. And people, I think, in people's minds, they got to be. And even when I went off to do storyboards, I'm like, I've been drawing comics for years and years. This will be no problem. And I happen to share a studio with a very prominent storyboard artist by the name of Adam Van Wyck. I shared a studio with him for a long time, and he's worked for everybody. He's worked on the Ice Age movies. He's worked on Despicable Me, and we worked on Legion of Superheroes. We worked on Scooby Doo. We worked on a bunch of different things. So I worked with him for a few years. And he's predominantly a storyboard artist. And again, I'd done comics for 25, 30 years at that point. And I'm like, this will be walk in the park. Storyboards were hard, man. They were complete, and comics are hard too. Comics are a lot of work. All of this stuff is a lot of work. But comics and storyboards in particular, when you start a project, you're already late. Anything you have going on for the next 3 or 4 weeks, if you're going to hit this deadline for this thing that they want, you really need to just clear the decks and tell your wife and your tell everybody this is what I'm doing for the next 4 weeks. See ya. Don't include me in any family events because I'm going to be working every night until and so storyboard. And comics, for instance, you do a panel, right, with a couple balloons, right, and there's a little scene there that's encapsulated in that panel, right? So, and your imagination, you as the reader, you kind of fill in what's going on. You imagine it, So this little scene can encapsulate a few minutes, and you know what I mean, as opposed to storyboards, where this little scene that takes a few minutes, if I'm a character talking, I have to do an A pose and a B pose for this arm, So I have to think about everything moving. I have to think about the camera moving. And I think about that with comics, but I'll use like a long panel to denote like a pan, or I'll do a long one and I want your eye to go down, but in the storyboards, you have to notate all of that stuff. So everything moves in storyboards. So
Kind of
you
like
have to,
animation art.
it's animation. It's animation. Storyboards are the blueprint for the animators, right? The animators are like, how do I do this scene? What's the storyboard say? So the storyboards are the blueprint for everything. Just kind of like the pencil art for like a comic book is sort of the blueprint for everything.
Gotcha.
Like everything gets inked, everything gets lettered, everything gets colored on top of these pencils,
Right.
generally, right?
Yeah.
In mainstream comics, when like they break down the various jobs from penciler to inker, what I mean?
Yes.
But the blueprint, you get the script just like you do in animation. You get a script, and then you're the one that's deciding like what shot I'm going to do, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do, right? So those two things, it's all about storytelling. And then mural art is like a whole nother thing, man. Portrait art is a whole nother thing. Like all of these things are different. And it does take me a while to get from like point A to point B when I have to like change gears and do these various things. And I also, I get bored easily. So I like to do all these different things. You know what I'm saying? So like I did comics pretty hardcore for 15 some years, and then I went and did like video game stuff for a while, just because I got bored.
Well,
I think
that's the thing with work. You have to keep yourself engaged. If you're not engaged and you're not enjoying yourself, what the hell are you doing?
right. And if you're sitting there doing like a monthly comic book, month in, month out, even if it's different comic books, there was like G.I. Joe, and then I did the Nth Man, and then I did, but you're still doing like a monthly comic book. So that's 22 pages like every 4 weeks. So it's like, we're on it. And after a while, I'm kind of like, let's do something else. So anyway.
Well, I think that's good that you can change hats for that reason, because I kind of get bored too with my job. If I can't figure something else better to do with myself, then I'm like, oh God, what am I doing here?
Right.
So in the comics world, you obviously you worked on G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, and you worked on Nymph Man. That's your first issue of G.I. Joe. It's one of my favorite arcs, actually. It's weird that it would be, but it's one of my favorite arcs because it was
fantastic.
So out there, that story. But I'll get into that later. And then Nymph Man #1.
There it is.
And so you also worked on Batman, Superman, Flash, Punisher, Ghost Rider, and Daredevil. And then you also worked on Morbus, the Vampire Slayer.
Yep.
Amongst maybe
bunches of other things.
Yeah. So first off, were you a G.I. Joe fan? That's what everybody's wondering.
Yes, and not so much a fan of this iteration of G.I. Joe, but when I grew up, like G.I. Joes were, this big, and I had them, and I loved them, and I loved playing with them, and I had a giant G. I had all sorts of stuff, and then when I moved away and went off to art school, I gave all of this stuff to like a neighborhood kid, I just gave it away. My mom was so mad. My mom was so pissed at me. But it was. So in that aspect, I was like, at that point, I was very much a G.I. Joe, but I was always a big fan of like war comics. Like I loved Sergeant Rock, and I loved Enemy Ace, and I loved, I loved all of these Joe Kubert and John Severn and Russ Heath and all these, I loved all of these war comics when I was a kid. And when I got into the industry, years later, of course, in like the early 80s or whatever, there really weren't any war comics anymore. And, because all of those kind of went away.
I think Sergeant Rock was still going, but it was at the very end.
This very end, and honestly, there were Cubert boys at that point to draw that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we have actual Cuberts that can draw that. We don't need you to draw it. So and if I remember right, like Andy Cubert drew some at the end, and I mean, and it was lovely and it was wonderful. Uh, um, but really, there wasn't, and I always, I guess now not so much, but I get, at the time, like I could draw all of this war stuff because I liked doing it. And G.I. Joe was kind of the closest thing. And Larry Hama was one of the first editors I went to see at Marvel when I was first starting out. And, he got me work, and that's how I kind of just fell into G.I. Joe. But I wasn't like, oh, I gotta draw G.I. Joe. It wasn't a thing. So at that point, it was just like, oh, I got a gig, I'm like, I'm actually working, that kind of thing.
You're jumping the shark a little bit, my friend.
Oh, okay.
So you were a G.I. Joe fan growing up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But being an artist, being an illustrator, being a comic creator was not your first passion, as I've been told. Weren't you a little bit into the arts, making music?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, yeah. I was in bands and all sorts of stuff. And I've been in bands, and played music throughout my life and stuff. So yeah, it was either I was going to go off and play in some band or go to art school. Those were my two, which way are we going to go? And basically I thought I could do the art thing like forever, and it doesn't matter like what you look like or how old you get, or actually it does, but not really. But in rock and roll, like you really kind of have to stay young forever. And I just saw myself, being like middle-aged and balding and sitting in a bar, and all I could do is sing a Journey song, that kind of thing. So I chose the art thing. Both things are equally mad, both things are equally crazy. And it's like,
It's true. If you
my
told your
father
mother
had
you
an
were going to be a
insane son.
it,
So
yeah, it's true. If you told your mother you're going to be a rock and roller, she'd be like, "Oh God, give me a break."
no, it was my dad. It
Oh,
was my dad. My mom was like, "Yay, you do it, buddy," but my dad would be like, no, yeah. So
and then did you gave him your second choice, being a comic book artist, and he was, "Oh yeah, okay, do the music thing, right?"
no, he at that point I think he just gave up. So he was just like, whatever. I just know that there was a point later in my career, like the early '90s, like things were crazy with like royalty money. Like the market was really weird, and it was all speculative driven, and there was just there's 800,000 number one copies of something, and
You're
they're
right.
all worth something, and
Yep.
of course they're not, but they were then. And like I got some nice royalty checks. So my dad was the first one I called, and I'd be like, I got a royalty check for, and he'd just be like, Jesus Christ, So
Totally.
yeah, yeah,
That's
he
funny.
was amazed by all that. So yeah, he was the first call. So
So you didn't get to be the runner up to the Beatles, but
no,
you got to, you got to go work at Marvel Comics. But before that, you got to go to the Kubert School of Art and Design, and
yes,
your classmates were Wee Leaks and the Kubert brothers.
yes, yes, and amongst many others, there was other people that are sort of just as talented that didn't like go off and do like mainstream comics. So
So how did you find out that there was a school in New Jersey that you could go to and learn to be a comic book artist?
it was on the back of the black and white Savage Sword of Conan magazine. There was an ad for the school. That's where I saw it. So yeah.
Now, did you move to New Jersey, or do you try to
Yes.
do the mail away thing?
No, I moved to New Jersey.
And
I
you went
lived
to
in
this.
Iowa like I do now. Excuse me. And my wife and my wife at the time, we moved to New Jersey. I went to the school.
So you figured this is going to be my career. I got to learn from the best. And you read his comics when you were young, and you were like, "This
Oh
guy's
yeah.
the best. He obviously knows what he's doing. Let
Yeah.
me put my hands in his hands and see what happens.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. So, yeah.
So how did that go? Obviously, you must have completed the school.
Yeah, I did. Well, there was no way I was going to go back and, tell my dad, like, I couldn't do this. I failed, so that was great motivation. It's a 3-year school. And there was like 80 some of us, 80 something, for my first year. And then by the third year, there were like 13 of us left.
Wow.
So something like that. I mean, it was like a really low number, because they're getting you ready to work to draw comic books, which is a lot of work. And so they gave you a lot of work, and they expected you to get it done in a certain amount of time. And then they were going to stick it all on a wall in a room, and we're all going to look at it, and they're going to critique it, in front of everybody. And these are a lot of things that a lot of kids aren't ready for, because you're going to this school, and odds are, wherever you went to school and you were the guy that drew everything, you were probably like the best one in the school, like, I'm the best one in yeah. And when people ask other people, like in the school, hey, who's the best artist? They say, oh, it's him, that kind of stuff, right? You're that guy. Well, you go to this school, and like you and everybody else are that guy. Like everybody there at that school was the best one in their, so everybody can do this. Everybody can draw at various levels, and not everybody is like, oh, I'm going to go draw Spider-Man, or I'm going to do, so like there's all different styles. There's all different, it's a big hodgepodge of things, but they still are going to like make you do all of this work.
All the basics.
Well, there's basics, and it's just the amount of stuff as well, because like you got all these different teachers, they all want something from you. So yeah, it's just a lot of work. And I don't think a lot of people are, it was a lot of work for me, but everything is. So,
Who was some of the teachers? Obviously Joe Kubert, but who else?
Jose Delbo. Do you know who Jose Delbo is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was great. He was just the best. He would make us draw horses, right? And like horses are really hard to draw. And he's one of these guys, he's like older, and I was neighbors with Gray Morrow, right? Was another, after I got out of art school, I lived next to Gray Morrow for a while. And he was another guy that could like draw horses just like out of their heads, and like Jose would give us, like, oh, you draw this horse, and he would say, Wagner, your horses, they look like Dobermans, like all your horses look like dogs, kind of. So it's just, and he would like whip out a horse with a cowboy on it in like no time at all, and then there was Erwin Hazen, who drew Dondi, Tex Blaisdell, Hi Eisman taught us lettering.
Wow.
And the first year I was there, Joe started an animation wing thing. It was in this little annexed, play, and he had gotten Milt Neal to teach animation, and Milt Neal was like one of these like Disney artists. Like he worked on like the Knight and the Dragon one. Oh, and then like Dumbo. Like Milt drew all of the stuff with the mouse, yeah, Dumbo, you can fly, that's all like Milt Neal.
Wow.
And then Milt also designed Howdy Doody and all the puppets on the show.
Was he one of the 7 old men?
Yeah, he was like one of those guys.
Wow.
So he was, so this was a big score for Joe, was to have like Milt Neal, and he almost talked me into going off and being an animator. I almost did that, but it's a lot of drawings, man. So let's see. Sal Amendola. I know some of these names aren't like whatever, but like those are some of the people I remember.
I'm old school. I have a recollection of a lot of these guys.
Uh-huh.
So you're in there with these guys, Lee Weeks and the Kubert sons, and you make it to the 13 at the end of the thing. And what do you do then? Do they gift you a job at Marvel, DC? Do they give you
No,
an internship or any of that?
no, no, no. You're off you go. Off you go. Yeah, good
So
luck. Good luck.
you gotta go hit the
No,
paint.
I drew like Joe was editing like Sergeant Rock at the time still or something. So like I know I got like a couple of these like 2-page spread things to do, whatever they were there, battle something or another, where like, oh, here's what a Gatling gun and the history of the Gatling gun kind of thing, like stuff like that. And then I had started doing through Sal Amendola, one of my teachers, I was doing backgrounds for a guy by the name of Stan Walk, who was drawing World's Finest at the time, the the Superman Batman title for DC. And I started out my third year, I started doing backgrounds for Stan. So that was my first job.
That was for World's Finest Comics.
Yeah.
And
So
how
I
long?
drew all the stuff Stan didn't want to draw.
Well, when you're the guy, you can pick and choose what you want to do, right?
Yeah, and you're the assistant, so
And you
you're
give
basically and it was
the dregs to the assistant guy or the intern or
well,
whatever.
and actually it was great experience because it made me have to draw all the stuff that you don't normally draw, like streets and offices and buses and cars and all of this stuff that if you're going to go work for Marvel, and again, say I want to go draw Spider-Man, it's great if you can draw Spider-Man, but can you draw Spider-Man swinging over like Manhattan in a thing, like can you draw all of these backgrounds and
make it look real?
And make it look real. So it was great experience for me as far as like, even though it was like boring and it's like, but you're drawing stuff that you need to know how to draw.
So then you go see Larry Hama and he says, hey, I need a guy.
No, Larry said, yeah, and I can't do his voice because he has this impossibly deep voice that I can't do, but he said, I want to see 22 pages of continuity or I don't want to talk to you. That was the first thing Larry said to me on the phone.
And that's one of the main principles of drawing comics, sequential artwork. That's what it is, sequential storytelling. If you can't tell a story.
And again, like, if you can draw this pinup of Spider-Man or whatever, that's great. But can you draw sequential storytelling? Can you tell a story? Can you draw backgrounds? Can you draw regular people? And can you draw offices and apartments and cars and things? And can you do all of that stuff? And I told Larry, I said, yes, I have my 22 pages of continuity. And I went to see him and basically kind of like, oh, you draw like one nose and 2 sets of eyes and you do this and you do and then he said, if you work really hard, like in a year you'll be really good, and this is after I just did 3 years at the school. And then he said, if you do 5 pages of really good superhero stuff, I'll take it to every editor up here. I'll take it around to every editor up here. And which was really sweet and magnanimous of him. And then I didn't do any of that. I went off and worked for like DC or somewhere for like a year. Like I just went off and like got work. And then I came back a year later and saw him again. And I had my big stack of stuff, boom. And he looked at a couple pages and then he started making calls and he gave me work and the rest is history. So.
Well, Larry's been through the trenches, just like you were. He had to do it through Neil Adams and through
Wally Wood
and stuff.
All of that. Yeah.
He's not going to give you the easy street. Even if he feels you are wonderful, he will help you.
Absolutely, and absolutely. I just think he just doesn't want anybody wasting his time.
Right. Yeah.
So like if you're coming in and you're just like, oh, here's all my pinups and I don't give a shit about storytelling and like then why are you here? You know, that kind of stuff. And if I'm going to help you and I'm going to tell you what to do with your stuff to make it better, and you don't listen to me, then you're wasting my time.
Gotcha.
So, you know, I get that. So, yeah.
So you came back with your stack of DC stuff, and he takes you and gives you GI Joe.
No, I think I did something for Savage Tales. I did some like thing for that, and then yeah, and then I think I did some other like weird stuff, you know, for Marvel here and there. But then at some point GI Joe came along.
And I think your first work on GI Joe was Yearbook 3.
That sounds right to me. So yeah.
You had, I think, a backup story. I don't know if Zek worked with you on that story or not.
I think I want to say Kim DeMolder inked that.
Okay.
The yearbook. I want to say I don't. It's not Mike Zach. So
okay.
Yeah, he did the cover.
Maybe he did the backup and he did the cover. Could be. I'm not sure. I can't recall. I'm just trying to run through all of your credits.
Yeah, man, that's a long time ago.
So you basically did, I think, like 59 to 100. You did off and on with Marshall Rogers, which is odd because both of your styles are actually similar but different in different ways. Mm-hmm. And you did a bunch of covers in that period as well. Yep. What was it about G.I. Joe that you wanted to do? What were your goals with it?
To have a job. Honestly, it was like I just had a job. I had work. That was so there wasn't any like, and I remember it always just felt like I was, and you know, and this might shatter illusions or whatever, but I always felt like I was just kind of hanging on the entire time because G.I. Joe's like there's a giant cast of characters. There's tons of like vehicles and things, and it's not like say like, oh, we want you to draw a World War II story, for instance, right? Everybody on each side, you know, American, Germans, Japanese, whatever, like everybody sort of dresses the same. You know, I mean, you know what I mean? Yes. Like we kind of have the same sort of outfits, right? And uniforms. G.I. Joe, nobody has the same uniform. Like everybody, you know, and it's all this like, as my friend Adam Van Wyck used to say, this was designed by somebody that only had to draw it once. Right?
So Hasbro toys.
Yeah. So now like you got all of these like Hasbro, you know, like things, and there's like everything, there's like a million, and everybody's different. You know,
the vehicles so like are out of this world.
Who the hell draws a logo? So it's really a lot of stuff. It's just, so I always felt like, oh my God, there's so much stuff. So I always felt like I was just kind of hanging on and getting it done, you know, that kind of thing. And then they would introduce like toys, right? Say that issue that you held up that you said you liked, you know, all of that.
The first
right?
Pogo.
So the Pogo thing. The Pogo thing. Like I had I had line art, and Russ Heath did it. It was like a character. It was a design for Hasbro. One angle of that Pogo thing, right? And there's your reference. Off you go and draw that issue. So like now you got to figure out. You got to extrapolate. Like, what does this thing look like from here? You know, and what does it look? You know, so you do the whole issue, and then 3 months later they send you the toy. You know, and like, oh, this.
They say, thanks, Ron Wagner, for designing our new Pogo toy.
Yeah, and like this would have been great to have, you know, like while I was drawing the issue, you know, that kind of thing. So it was always just like, so I guess for me, it was just like it was a job. You know, it was just like I had a job in comics. I've justified my existence, my whole like moving out here and going to the school, and by God, I have work. So that's kind of what it was for me.
Um, what about the whole aspect of the toy type attitude that Larry had when he got GI Joe, that it was like the dregs the earth, and nobody in the entire bullpen wanted to do it. And he was at the end of the office, and it took Jim Shooter and somebody else to try and get somebody to do it. And Larry was the last guy that they thought to go to, because nobody wanted to do a toy property comic. Did you have that kind of a thought process when you were doing it, or it was just work? I'm going to do it, try to do the
It's
best
just
job I can
work.
do.
And I don't know if that mentality, that sort of like, oh, it's a toy book. I don't know if that like affected my career detrimentally later on. Like I don't know if it's like, oh yeah, he's like he does war stuff or GI Joe, so like I don't know if anybody took me less seriously or not, that kind of
Well,
thing.
but
So
at the
I don't
time,
know. But I've heard that from Larry. I've heard that like,
right.
it was just like, you
I-
know.
I'm just curious if that was the same with you or not, because at the time that you came onto the book, they were doing like 100,000 copies of GI Joe. GI Joe is considered one of the highest sales comics in the history of comics, in the top 10 sales of comics, GI Joe. And that was
Right.
the era that you were on the book. I would say from the 40s, late 30s to like the mid 80s is
Uh-huh.
was their top frame of period, and they were in 100,000 copies an issue. So it wasn't the dregs of the earth, because it was selling a lot of
Right.
copies.
Where's my royalty check?
Exactly. Right.
Where's my royalty checks?
But doing stuff like that, it's obviously work for hire. And I've seen so many people try to do things to Marvel, and they never get anywhere.
No, no,
So,
no. They own everything. It's corporate comics. It's,
yeah.
like it's, so I guess already, I already had that sort of mindset and that attitude. It's
Yeah.
like, this is all corporate comics. I'm under no delusion that I'm doing like high art here, or, it's like, to me, it's a job, it's a gig. Somebody else is going to ink it. Somebody else is going to color it. Like, I don't have control over that stuff. And from an early point, for me, like as soon as it goes to FedEx, like it's out of my head. Like I don't, like I may see the actual printed comic later on and then get depressed, because I'm like, oh, the coloring is, it just, but I don't get too invested in that.
I agree, because a lot, especially during this period, the paper that they
Yeah,
were using, they could only use so many colors at this point in
yeah,
comics. And
and
I always thought, a
and
yellow cover for this?
and
Really?
they were using like a cheaper printing process
Right.
for the insides then. So like stuff just looked kind of crappy, and it was all, it's not, it's comics. So again, I've just always, even though I try to do my best in the time that I have, at some point, like once it's out the door, like I don't worry about it too much. I can't let that affect me,
Right.
or I'll sit around and mope around for a couple weeks and then not get on to the next thing, and that kind of stuff. So I've been pretty mercenary about it ever since I was early on.
So this is probably going to really make you feel sad, because they're making merchandise on the
Oh
cover.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's Mike Zex. So that's not me. That's Mike Zex. So
But I guess you did the interior. You're right. The cover
I
is
did.
pretty
I
cool.
did the interior. Yeah.
But
But
still,
see that like Zex should get a royalty check.
you'd
So
think. But he's still at comic conventions selling his art, so
sure
apparently
he
not.
is. Sure he is.
Um, so you did a bunch of issues. You helped create a bunch of new vehicles, characters, designs, and stuff like that. Did you have any fascination that this was going to live for 40 years, and that people were going
No,
to be coming to you at conventions? Hey, Ryan,
no.
can you sign my comic?
No, no, I had none of no, no, because at the time, like I'm like here, I mean, I have a nice place, but I'm still just sitting in a room, and like doing this stuff, and this was long before, the interwebs and, all of this, where you can see everybody all the time. Like none of that happened. And I still don't do hardly any conventions, but like I certainly didn't then. And so I just thought like, well, nobody's reading this, nobody gives a shit about this, and like nobody cares. And then years later it's like, people like are like very much cared. But no, at the time, like, no, I had no sort of like, this will live on, so yeah, no.
So you move on. Larry comes to you and said, "Hey, I'm doing this ninja type character, Nth Man," and you're like, "Who
Yeah,
the hell is Nth Man?" And hey, you want to work with me on that?
yeah, that was kind of it.
And that's what you tell him. You say, "Yeah, I'll work with you, Larry, hand in
Yeah.
hand."
Yeah, because I at that point, like, I was kind of tired with the GI Joe stuff anyway. Even though Nth Man turned into like more, like, I have to draw armies and things and stuff. It was like, it was still like a lot of stuff. It was a lot of stuff. So, Larry, can we do an issue where it takes place like in the middle of a snowstorm, on a mountain, like it's all white and it's like one guy fights another guy. That's it, and the whole thing is like silhouettes. Let's do that. So no, it was never that. So it was always like, uh, C3 cargo planes or whatever landing in the middle of like Red Square and all of these troops and like it's just all of this stuff all the time, man. So yeah, but I
And that,
loved it. I was young. I was into it. I was ready for it. So
it had to have been more challenging than GI Joe because your GI Joe run is sporadic, every issue or every couple
yeah,
issues or a cover or whatever.
yeah,
But Nth Man, you pretty much did the entire series except for issue 8.
yeah,
Uh, that was monthly, so you had to really get ahead of steam to get that all monthly, and it went for 16 months. The
yeah.
challenges on that, what was that like?
Well, again, it was another, like you're on the hamster wheel. Let's go, let's get it done. Let's go, 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 go. So no, it was pretty intense. So, Larry had me go buy. I was living in New Jersey at the time, and Larry had me go buy all of the same military reference books that he had. So we had identical, and there was a military bookstore in Manhattan at the time. It's probably long gone. It's probably a Starbucks or something now, but like, it was exclusively a military bookstore. Like you could buy reference books, all military, on anything. And basically Larry had me buy all of the same books he had, so he wouldn't have to send me his books, which he'll tell you many of his books never get back to him.
I've heard him say that in interviews.
Of
I've
course
heard
he
him
did.
say it before.
I know. I've heard it before.
He's Yeah, he said he had to get people to start buying their own.
Yeah. So I had all the same books he had. So when we wrote the scripts, he would just say, "Oh, this is a soldier from the Red Army. This is what they look like. This is in this book. Here it is." So I would have exactly the same stuff he had. Yeah.
So Nth Man gets canceled, but you continue to work in the comic industry. You've worked on a lot of seminal characters: Superman, Batman, Flash, Punisher, Daredevil. Um, were there any challenges, difficulties, anything different about those experiences than GI Joe and Nth Man? And
They're all different. The only thing with say something like, I don't know, Superman, or there's only like one guy, as opposed to like, oh, here's a whole team, of like people, in various different outfits, with different guns, and uh and it's not to say that none of those were hard. It's just like various and different things come into play, like how interested I am in it, and a lot of that has to do with like who's inking it. Like if the inker is really good, I'll get excited. that kind of stuff. It was always exciting working on Batman. It was exciting working on a number of these characters, even though I felt like there was a couple times where it felt like I was always working on like the off brand of that character. Like I did Daredevil, but he was in that like sort of like gray suit with the little
New
things on his
armor.
shoulders. And then he transitioned back to the yellow suit for a little bit. And then like right at the end of my run, he was back in the red suit. And I'm like, damn, I want to draw the red suit. And then I drew some issue of Batman, and it was when Bruce Wayne was out with something, and like Dick Grayson was running around as Batman, and like with his ponytail or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I draw Batman, but it's not really Batman. It's Dick Grayson, so I want to draw Batman, or so it just seemed like I was drawing like the off-brand of some of these characters. So anyway, yeah.
Well, the 90s was the reinvention of a lot of these characters, and they were
Yes.
trying to change it and throw whatever they could at the wall and mix
Yeah.
it up and invigorate those characters. So yeah, unfortunately, you have a lot of that in the 90s when you
Right.
were primarily a comic artist.
Right.
But then you go to Morbus, the Vampire Slayer,
And
and
Morbius was kind of like right after Nth Man.
oh, it was.
Yeah. So like that was I kind of like popped right into Morbius. So that was and these other things sort of happened along the way too. But if I remember correctly, like Morbius happened pretty much after Nth Man did.
So,
So
what was the controversy with Morbus? Were you putting stuff in the backgrounds that was naughty?
yeah. Yeah, I drew all sorts of stuff. Mostly just to see if anybody was paying attention, because I really, I didn't make any friends with editors with that kind of thing. I just wanted to, because I always felt like they weren't really looking at anything. It was just all they cared about, and really it's their job to like, I need these pages by this time because it has to ship and it has, so it's very much like, do I have all the pieces? Now can I get it out the door? So it's less about like, oh, I'm going to sit and look at all of this stuff that Ron painstakingly drew, and call him up and tell him how much I loved it, like that is, so I'm just like, oh, I'll see what they notice, that kind of stuff. And it wasn't anything super terrible, and like you would just have to look really close. I would have to point it out to you. People would be like hard pressed to, although, and then I had a friend in the bullpen, Darren Auk. He worked in the Marvel bullpen for a long time, and every now and then he would catch stuff, and then he'd call me up. He's like, dude, you can't, you can't do that. We're gonna have to change that. And he would do little patches on things and stuff. So no, I would get bored, and then I would, get naughty, I guess, and
Did anything get out the door where they had to like scrap it or whatever?
no, no,
No.
no, no, no. Again, I was like pretty subtle. It's like, and I think this whole story. And I don't, and it's not that I did not do it, but I think the story has taken on proportions to where like, oh my God, he was drawing pornography, and it was just like it went out the door, and it was just like, I'm never one to let the truth stand in the way of a good story. So I'm not going to correct any of that. So I'll just let it, we'll just let it go. So yeah.
Well, the truth is going to be here
Yeah.
for all posterity now to see. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. So yeah.
So
you would have to find the reprints of all this stuff anyway. And who has reprints? Nobody. So yeah.
Well, I have an extensive comic collection, I would say.
You have an extensive comic collection, but not everybody does. So yeah.
So, but you were kind of talking about the collaborators, and you wanted to work with different people, and it made you happy to work with different inkers and stuff like that. Talk about some of those collaborations over the years that you enjoyed, and people that maybe were difficult or maybe gave you a hard time, that are hard asses, editors like Larry Hama. No, probably not.
But nobody gave me a hard time. But some of the inkers that I did enjoy working with, Bill Sienkiewicz inked me.
Wow.
He inked. We did this like Blaze miniseries. It was the Johnny Blaze thing,
Yeah.
and
Spirits
it
of
was all
Vengeance
that like
stuff.
Midnight Suns stuff,
Yeah.
and it was around after Morbius, and he was I think he was under contract with somebody or something, so he didn't use his real name. He signed the name Howard Rourke, who I think is the guy from The Fugitive, right? That's his name. So, but anyway, so if you find this like 4 issue thing of Blaze,
I have
like
it.
Bill inked it, but it's like it says in the credits it says Howard
You
Rourke.
you can
So
tell what his art looks like. That's the
hey,
thing.
totally.
I
You
I
take
can
one
tell
look at it. You take one look at this and you go, oh yeah,
Bill
that's Bill
Sienkiewicz.
Sienkiewicz right away.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um uh, uh Bill Reinhold is another one of my favorite inkers. And he's inked me on a lot of different stuff. He did we did the Daredevil stuff for Marvel, but we did a book called The Book of Fate. We did like for DC, and Giffen wrote it. And I love that. And it was like completely insane, the storyline. But then like editorial staff started messing with us again because they can't leave things alone. But but working with Bill Reinhold, I really enjoy. He's another one of my favorite inkers. So yeah. So those are a couple. So
Okay. And
yeah. And
editor.
Russ Heath inked one of my GI Joes. So that was like a big thing for me. It was like, oh my God, Russ Heath is inking I'm glad. And I think I already had the issue drawn when I found out that like he was gonna and I'm glad because I'm sure I would still be redrawing that issue today if I knew that like Russ is gonna ink this page. I gotta like so I'm glad that I didn't find out until later that Russ was actually, so that was a big thing, big
It,
deal too.
it must have been in a pickle or something to have him do an issue.
So I forget. It was something. I forget. It was just some weird random thing, and it was just. And I still have a few of those pages today, and they're like prized possessions of mine because Russ was a big hero of mine, and I actually had him sign one of the pages years later at a convention.
Wow,
So yeah,
it's cool.
yeah, super cool.
So, and you had no issues with any editors or anything like that because I had heard
No, I
about.
think they had issues with me. I think you need to talk with editors and they'll give you Ron Wagner stories. But I never, everybody was a sweetheart to me, man. So, yeah, I was I was young and stupid. So, it was, yeah, and I was off half the time playing in a band. So, I didn't want to sit at a drawing table. I wanted to like be out playing in a band. It's way more fun. So,
But that's interesting that both you and Larry are both in bands and did music and stuff like that. So
I
you must
think a
have
lot
chatted
of
about that.
I think a lot of art people are like that. I think there's a lot of people that have kind of multiple things going on like that because you're kind of in touch with that part of your brain anyway,
Right.
you know. So although I wish I was a little more in touch with like the businessman part of my brain. I wish that was a little more active sometimes than I'm just going to create stuff, and I'm not worried about money. So, that kind of stuff. So it's, yeah, I think there's a lot of artists that are multi-arty. And
Larry,
rock and roll's fun, man. Rock and roll,
Larry was hitting everything he could. He was acting, he was
he was
doing music, he was
acting.
doing
Yep.
editing, comics, drawing.
Yep.
He was trying to do everything. That guy.
Yep.
Uh,
Life is short. Got to pack it all in.
it's true. It's true. Um, so you worked for a lot of different comic companies, doing a lot of different comic characters and stuff like that. But then you work on start doing gaming design and
Uh-huh.
a lot of these other things, portrait artistry, and
Uh-huh.
murals, stuff like that. Were there any challenges or difficulties, or talk about each of them in their own right?
Uh, the video game thing kind of came about just because I'd kind of gotten to a point where I was a little bored drawing comics and just some other life things kind of happened. And I'm just like, I just want to go off and do this. Um, and weirdly enough, I ended up in like Raleigh, North Carolina, and I went to like a computer school there. And there was also like there was lots of sort of like Red Storm was there, and like some other like video game companies were around. And basically, this school basically spit out people to go work at these video game companies.
Right.
And I guess I wasn't like brave enough to like, make the move to kind of go to California and get into like animation and stuff. So I did this weirdly, and then that got me into a video game company. But I learned that first of all, I'm not a gamer. I'm not a gamer.
I'm not either.
So right there, you're suspect. Like this is, well, then
Not
what are
one
you
of
doing
us.
in this industry?
Yeah.
And I got through the school, and it was like a short school. It wasn't like, and I felt like at a loss the entire time because I just started like messing with computers. So everything was really hard. And then there were like kids that were younger than me, that were super good, that could like make stuff and texture map things. And I was more interested in like animation, and this school wasn't necessarily designed to teach you animation. It was all about teaching you 3D Studio Max, Photoshop, so that you can go work for a video game company and do low poly models and texture map them, right? Because that's basically what you have to do to build a video game.
Right.
Because everything is made out of like low poly models, and everything's texture mapped, and so you have a little place that you can run around and shoot each other in. All of that has to be built and made and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I found out pretty quickly that I didn't care about any of that. Like I didn't like texture mapping. I didn't like, what I did like was, and this is why they hired me at this game company, and the game company was Sinister Games was the name of the game company. And they needed art. They needed someone to design characters and levels and AI screens, and you need someone to draw all this stuff, to design all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's why they hired me, and I like doing that. But at some point, like that's all done, and now we have to build the damn thing. And that's where I started to check out. I'm just like, I don't care about it. I don't want to sit and make another low poly model, blah, 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 blah. And I found out pretty quickly, like, I just want to do the cut scenes. I should go work for Blizzard in California, because that's who's doing all the cool stuff.
Yeah.
Like I want to do the cool scenes in between, like you playing on this level, running around, shooting whatever it is you're gonna, that kind of stuff. So I just felt like a lot of what I do, storytelling, things like that, there was no need for that there, because you weren't really telling a story,
Right.
because in my mind, they break down into like a few categories. There's a first person shooter, there's the third person shoot, whatever, where you're on a team and all of your guys can run and do this mission, or you're in a racing game.
Right.
We worked on the Dukes of Hazzard racing game,
What?
so it's like, so to me, there's like 3 or 4 types of games, and everything is just a version of those types.
Yeah.
But you're not really telling a story.
No, because it's up to the
and video games I know are like super complex now, and super, there's a whole tons of things happening. So like I'm talking, just my very limited experience. And again, I wasn't a gamer, so I didn't have a lot of skin in the game in that area. Whereas like comics, even though I was bored with comics, I still like telling stories.
Right.
And comics are sort of, you do it all.
Right.
You do, it's all up to you.
Yeah.
And you can kind of cowboy this thing out, like, and I'm going to do it all. I'm making it all. But like with video games, it's all collaborative. There's lots of different people. You're doing different elements. You're doing, so it's less. And again, there's no storytelling. There's no like, that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a basic concept, but like, So you run around and you acquire things and you kill things, and that's really the story. And
Yeah.
then you make it to the next level.
Or you're in a fight with a guy in a fighter type thing, and he blows up his head and blood squirts everywhere.
Right. But then you don't make it to the next level or whatever. I mean, but it's always
Yeah.
kind of the same thing over and
Gotcha.
over again,
Right.
so the video game thing, and again, like stuff happened in my life, and parents died and things, and then I moved back to Iowa, and I thought I was going to be a portrait artist, and like that's like the last place you want to go to do that. So, but I still did portraits. I learned a lot, and in my mind, even though I go off and do these things, and maybe I don't stick with it, or it's not, what I mean? Like, oh, he did that for the next 60 years of his life. I still like learn stuff,
Yeah.
like I learn techniques, I learn things, I learn,
You have to
better at
take
computer
positives
stuff.
out of these.
And portrait stuff, it's a whole nother thing to do, so I just like to do different things. So, and that's what I do.
And then I guess you did murals for work for up up down and zombie burger and
Zombie burger. Zombie burgers.
not
There's a zombie burger restaurant here in Des Moines. And just because I knew the right people here in town, I ended up doing some murals for the restaurant, and
I've
it's proved pretty
I've been to that
successful.
restaurant
So,
and the artwork on that
oh,
place is incredible. So I've been there. I've eaten their burgers. It's
cool.
fantastic. I love that restaurant.
Good.
I've been there
Good. I'm
twice.
glad you like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because of that, I've done like a couple other murals here around town, that kind of thing. So that kind of got me into a little of that. So,
Is
yeah.
that fun doing murals?
Yeah. Yeah. It's super fun. And again, it's a whole nother thing, because now you're decorating a space, and there's size considerations and people, and like how is it going to exist on the wall, like physically, like, are you going to paint this on the wall? Are you going to do big canvases and then hang them? Are you going to, like how, so these are considerations that you have to think, or I had to think about, because I'd never done anything like that when I first got that gig. So like, how do I, how is this going to be on the wall? Like, I don't want to, like, say they're building out the space, right? So you have construction people there, you have painters, you have stuff. So what, you're going to like paint this on the wall physically? There's three of them, three of these murals there, and like they're all 3 feet tall. One of them's 16 feet long, another one's 18 feet long, and another one was like 26 feet long,
Wow.
right? So like they're long sort of things, and there's tons of figures on them, right? You've been there,
Yeah.
right? So there's just like all of these figures. So are you going to stand there and paint these by hand and spend like weeks painting on this wall, right? With scaffolding, and there's workers and stuff everywhere, like, are you going to do that? Or are you going to like build custom frames and mount canvases and paint them, right? Well, I didn't want to do any of that, because I don't, and you have to like charge a reasonable amount of money, so if I'm gonna get all like Michelangelo about it, and
Well, that's
like,
what I was just
we're
thinking.
gonna,
The Sistine Chapel. Like, what the-
right, right. So what, are we gonna do something like that? Well, guess what? Do you have like $80,000? Do you have $150,000 you want to pay? You got $200,000 you want to? My price keeps getting higher, because I'm like, no, I want more. But like, that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time, and it's a lot of um, money and material and things. So at the time, some other restaurant had opened here in town, and they had blown a mural up on one of their walls. They'd stuck this thing on the wall. And I'm just like, how did that happen? And the manager was like, oh, we went to this place here in town, and they just like print it off on vinyl, and then they stick it to the wall.
Oh.
Guess what? That's how the murals are going to be. That's how the zombie burger murals are going to be. So I did them smaller and scan them, put them together, Photoshop, blah, 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 blah. And then they print them out on vinyl, and they hammers and paint, you know.
And did you have to like go over it and stuff just a little bit just to make sure it looked all right?
No, I had it all figured out.
Oh,
I had it all figured out and ready to go, like, because I know the size, I know what I got to do. I just, you just got to do the things. But getting through that process is part of it.
gotcha.
Like how is this physically going to exist on this wall? I had to figure that out because I don't know. I've never done this,
Right.
and I know I don't want to stand there and paint on this wall for 3 or 4, 6 months or whatever, or longer,
No, because I had a friend that was a mural painter, and that's exactly what he did. He had to get parchment paper, he had to like draw it little bits at a time, go back over it, paint it. It was like
Yep.
a 3-step process, but it took
Yep.
him like a month to do a mural.
Yep. 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 And and they, once I get this artwork done and it's scanned and it's printed on this vinyl, it just takes them like an afternoon to stick this thing on the wall.
Roll it up there, make sure there's
Yeah.
no bubbles in it, and
Blip,
that's it.
blip, blip, done.
Wow.
And then it's and really, it's a glorified hamburger place,
Yeah.
right? So it's not like it's like, oh, it's a fine restaurant,
Right.
with like, prints with beautiful, framing, and and believe me, they have restaurants like that here in town. But this is a glorified hamburger joint, right? So like, little Billy sticks his ketchup hand on this, they can just wipe it right off, it's like it's all, it works. And you can do it for a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah. That's the key, right? Is your time, your money,
Well,
efforts.
for whoever's paying you, that's key. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So, you're doing all these different things. You're getting experience from all these different avenues and projects and stuff like that. Where does that take you? So it's 2023 now. What have you been doing all these years? All these different things through this time frame, right?
what have I been doing?
What?
Well, I mean, I've done other things. I did some, drew some stuff for DC. I did some stuff here. I did some stuff. I did a Muslim comic book called The 99 for a couple of
Oh
years.
yeah, I've seen that.
I did, I did storyboards for a while, so like it's just kind of, and one thing leads into another. And then I've been working on a project for the last couple of years that I can't talk about, but I've been busy with that. I still do tons of commissions, so I stay busy. So yeah. And then,
Um,
at some point, my hands will hurt too bad and I'll have to retire. So
I'm sorry about that. That's
nah, it's just getting old, man. It's just getting old. So
um. So then, what are your goals for your future? You can't talk about what you're doing now, but your goals for the future. Are you going to be retiring, or are you going to be,
I'm not going to retire.
no,
So
going to
no,
keep going?
I'm just going to keep going.
You're going to be
So
one of those guys that is.
that's my hope. That's my hope right here. Just boom, right? Just there. We're done. It's all, wrap it up. No long lingering, nothing, no. Oh, he was, he declined and then no, let's just boom, we're done. So I don't know. So I don't know because I've been working on this project for a long time. It feels like it'll never end. And I don't really have like a big plan for afterwards. I just don't know what I'm going to do. I don't necessarily want to, and I haven't for a long time now. I don't want to try to do mainstream comics.
It's different now than it was.
It is, and I joke about the age thing, but that's a reality. Like they don't necessarily hire old guys.
It's true. It's
They
true. You
don't,
have to be
and because
really.
I'm sorry.
You have to be really one of the legends in order to get one jobs now at that age. Even
Exactly,
George
exactly.
Perez, he was he was like in his late 60s, but he gave up 6 months prior before he passed doing comics because his eyesight was too bad and his other.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's, they give those guys because they're legends or whatever, but
right.
you don't typically see that in the comic industry. It's young guys and they
It's
can't
young
even
guy.
keep up
Well,
with
and
schedule.
if you're, and if you're like grinding away on a monthly book, it pays to be younger, because like I don't think I have the will to do that anymore. Like, oh, I'm gonna plug away on a monthly book, and I get bored. I get really bored, especially if it's something that like I'm just really not into. Like before I worked on this project that I'm working on now, I did like this kind of Scooby Apocalypse stuff for DC.
Yeah, I
And
have
like,
that.
and and as much as I love Keith Giffen and I adore Keith Giffen,
That
he's
was
like
interesting.
one of my favorite artists. And like he wrote that Book of Fate stuff that I did. I love that. But I really didn't enjoy the Scooby Apocalypse stuff that much. I wasn't really into it. And I just, so I don't, so I'd rather not work on something like that if like, this is the only thing that comes along and like, oh, here, I need a paycheck or whatever. But I'd rather, but that being said, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So as far as like the future.
But
So
that's gonna stink though if you have to do something you really don't want to do to get a paycheck. That's not enjoying the work you're doing
it's
anymore.
not. And I've done that. And I've done that a lot. I spent an inordinate amount of my career doing that. Like it's just there's very few things I feel that like, boy, I really love doing this. A lot of so much of everything was just like I'm working to get work, to pay bills, I'm happy to have this work and this is what I do and this is what I'm good at and that sort of thing. But like again, like if it's the property isn't what I'm really into, or like you can tell like the company isn't really into it, and the inkers maybe, so it's just so a lot of things can just be like, I don't give a shit about this, and now it looks like it, to me,
Yeah.
like I can look at them like, yeah, I'm not into this, man, and I just rather not produce stuff like that. So
What have you ever like gone out of your way to search for something that you want to do? Like when artists get to a certain caliber, they can actually go get their own work, like create their own work or whatever. Like,
yeah, and I have a few of my own little things that I've kind of messed with here and there. And I would be more interested in doing those kind of things. But then that uh, now you have to figure out how to fund that,
it's true.
right? Because nobody's like this thing I've been working on that I can't talk about. Like I'm getting paid to do that,
Right.
so it's not like like, oh, I got to produce all this stuff and maybe we'll sell it,
Yep.
and maybe someone will buy, so if you're coming up with your own properties, your own things, there's a lot of groundwork you got to do and a lot of stuff you have to
It's
produce
true.
before you ever see any money,
It's true.
or you have to figure out how to raise money, and there's guys that are really good at that. I see like Graham Nolan, he has his own stuff going on, and he fundraises and crowds, so he does a lot of that kind of stuff. He also has probably, certainly a bigger fan base than I have, but like, so he's very good at working it, and like, and he makes enough money to produce his own comics. So that, that kind of thing is great. So I would have to get a lot more motivated and do something like that, I think.
But
So
but you're 100% correct because even like I said, I used George as an example before. I'll use him again. He tried to do Crimson Plague, his own book, and he had to restart the thing 3 times, and it never actually completed. I don't think they ever completed a complete miniseries with that because he could never get enough time and money to do it.
right, right.
So I'm right
Right.
there with you. I know exactly what you're saying. The only way to do creator-owned stuff that you really want to do is to go to like an indie publisher like Dark Horse, like Frank Miller, John Byrne. All those guys went to Dark Horse in the early '90s and did all their creator-owned stuff, and that's where they all became rich because of it.
Right. Right. But if you're not Frank Miller, if you're not, now you don't have that sort of name recognition,
Right.
and I know like Image Comics, because they do creator owned stuff too. But like, you have to have at least like 3 issues in the can. You have to have, they have to sell so many X amount of copies of it to get back their costs
Right.
before you get anything.
Yeah.
So there's 3 issues of something that you have to create, for nothing. It's like, so yeah, I want to go do this creator owned stuff, but like, how are you going to fund that? How do that's there's your problem. That's what you have to figure out. And that's essentially what I'm going to have to do, if I'm going to carry on and do my own thing.
Well, I look forward to whatever it is that you do come up with
So do
because you
I.
you're a very good artist. You have a unique style. Whenever I read one of your issues, because I do GI Joe reviews, whenever I come to an issue, I'm like, oh, that's Ron's. I can tell his hair. I can tell how he does his face. You have distinct hair,
Thank
and stuff
you.
like that. So I know your issues. But
Got it.
well, so is there anywhere where the fans can reach you and talk to you? I talk to you on Messenger and you responds once in a while, but obviously you're working, but you do respond. Is there anywhere else where the fans can go to interact with you? Uh, you know,
Uh, well, I have a website. Um, I'm trying to think of it's www.rjwagner.com.
okay.
So there's that. And I'm on the interwebs, I'm on the Book of Face and the Instagram and I'm on the TikToky, but I don't post very much. I just look at a lot of stuff. So I'm on a few things, so I'm around. So if I'm certainly on Facebook. There's a Ron Wagner art page. There's my regular Ron Wagner page. So it's, I can be found if
Cool.
you want. If you look hard enough, I'm out there. So yeah.
Well, I found you.
Right? There you go.
Um, so you said earlier that you don't do a lot of appearances, but you're a fairly regular guest at AR Assembly Required, Brian Sauer's convention. I got to meet you this last year. The previous
Uh-huh.
year, I got to watch your video that you did for the fans, which was very enjoyable.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I never saw that. I never saw the video, so I don't know how it turned out.
Oh,
So
it was good. You're always pretty funny. That's one of the interesting things about you. You have a good sense of humor about yourself. You don't take yourself too seriously.
no, 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 I can't. Well, the assembly required thing is always just like down the street because it's here in town. So I don't have to go very far. That's part of the appeal. And Brian and all the people that put them on are all just fabulous people. Even though I'll never tell Brian that, but no, I'm just kidding. He's a sweetheart. They all are. So I always enjoy doing it, and I always feel like I'm sort of, I'm the guy. Like I'm like,
You
they
always
don't
have
have
a
another
people there.
guy that drew GI Joe here in town. So like
It's
I'm kind of the guy. So I sort of have a captive audience a little bit. I mean they bring in, like other people, from that have designed stuff in the past and everything that have because I'm kind of old hat at this point, but I still pull a number of folks and that kind of thing. So it's just, I always enjoy doing that show, and they get bigger each year. They get bigger and better. So
Brian has been doing a really good job. I think he's going to be on par with Joe Fest. That's going to be in June. Have you ever thought about branching out and actually traveling to a show if you were invited?
if I was invited, possibly. So, since we've had the plague, like I've been, that's been a great sort of like, oh yeah, I can't really go anywhere because of the plague. So that's been a great excuse for me. But now that things are loosening up, I may have to reconsider that. But the Joe Fest would be fun. I've just never been asked. So, which, again, I don't care one way or another. Actually, I'm butthurt about that. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
The
did you ever go
assembly
to
required thing is easy. It's here in town.
any Joe Cons over the years?
No,
You were never invited to Joe Con. I'm shocked.
no, they don't like me. I'm telling you. No, I'm just
Well,
kidding.
Joe Con's been canceled, but Joe Fest is the grandfather of it. It's the next thing, and it's been going for about 5 years, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And it's basically the main GI Joe convention, but AR is trying to catch up to it, and it's really giving it a run for its money. So there's going to probably be two big shows every year now. But I think that would be wonderful for you to go to Joe Fest. I'll talk to Ed Schumacher and see if he can maybe give you an invite. I think he's lined everything up for this year, maybe next year.
That's fine. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Thanks.
Uh,
Thanks. Yeah.
so is there anything else that you would like to add? Is there anything you would like to show from your archives or anything to the fans?
I don't. I really didn't prepare anything. So no, I can't. Thank you for the interest and the time. And this has been a pleasure.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me too. I love to hear the insides and outs of creators and their thinking processes and stuff like that. And I know the rest of the fan base does too. We don't get that opportunity that often. So that's what 3D Joe's is for. So the fans can see these things and see what you guys have done over the years and how you get to where you got to and stuff like that. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule to do this interview, Ron. And I will probably see you at AR this coming year.
Beautiful.
So
thank you. Send me a link to this, to wherever this is going to be on your thing, so I can show it to my wife, because she's like, "What is this on?" And what and of course I don't know anything. So you'll have to send me a link, and I can see. Look, really, I was on a thing. So yeah.
it'll be on the 3D Joe's YouTube channel,
Okay.
and it'll be on the 3D Joe's actual site. It'll be under Comic Book Profiles by David Allen, me.
Great.
So
Perfect.
those will be the places. So
Perfect.
well, all right. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again next time, folks.
Thanks, David.